start on page 128 if you want to follow along. One of the many melodies, Hine Matov, how good and how pleasant it is that we can be together. And it is good, nice to see all you people. Hine Matov Manayim Shevet Achim Gam Yachad. 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 Shevet Achim Gam Yachad.
Shabbat Shalom, good Shabbos, and welcome to all of you. It's so nice to see you tonight. As I've been saying for the last few weeks, this is a challenging time to be a Jew in this country. And I'm so grateful to see so many people here tonight, members of CBS, people who are curious, our non-Jewish friends and neighbors who are with us tonight in support. So we're just really delighted that you're here for our Shabbat service as well as our guest speaker. So I want to acknowledge a few people tonight. First of all, our guest speaker, Peter Coyote, along with his wife, Laura Keller Coyote, newlyweds, relative newlyweds, and the honeymoon was great, right? Paris, Boston, New York, and London. So welcome back. And I'll introduce Peter more formally after our service, but we're delighted that you're here with us tonight. I want to also acknowledge the World Religions class from Pacific Union College. You're going to get a double treat tonight. You'll learn a little bit about Judaism and probably a little bit about Buddhism. So we're happy you're here, as you were last year. And also I'd like to acknowledge my mother-in-law, who's been visiting since Wednesday and who's leaving on Monday, the lovely and talented Gail Gill. So welcome. So we're happy that all of you are here, and we are going to begin our service with the lighting of Shabbat candles. So I'd like to invite Susie Myers to come up to the bima, and if you'd like to follow the blessing along with Mimi. The blessing is on page 120 if you'd like to follow along. Little surprise.
Yeah, well, I drag her into everything.
Moral support.
Yeah, I drag her into everything, yeah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat.
We're on 120. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat.
Page 142. This song, this prayer actually, Shalom Aleichem, was composed in the 16th century by a group of young Jewish mystics in the Galilee, in the town of Tzfat. Raise your hand if you've ever been to the Galilee or Safed, Tzfat. Actually, quite a few of you. So it's a very mystical place, very beautiful place, and a place in a little bit of distress right now. This was composed by people yearning for peace. And this song is about peace, about invoking God's guardian angels to come be with us on Shabbat. And that sentiment for peace is something I think we all know we need desperately in the world today. Page 142.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Boachem l'Shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu Nile Shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon. Melech Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Sheichem l'Shalom, Malachei HaShalom,
Page 144, the Chatzi Kaddish.
Yitgadal, Yitkadash, Shemei Rabbah, B'alma Divrach, Hirute, V'amlich Malchute, B'chayechon Uv'yomechon, U'chayei D'chol Beit Yisrael, Ba'gala, Ba'gala, Uv'izman Kahariv, Ve'imeru, Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mevarach, Le'olam U'olmei Almaya, Yitbarach, Yitbarach, V'yishtabach, V'yitpa'ar, V'yitroman, V'yitnaseh, V'yithadar, V'yithale, V'yithala, Shemei Dekudesha Barichu, Le'la min kol birchata v'shirata, Tushbechata v'nechemata, Da'amiran b'yama, Ve'imeru, Amen.
Our call to worship, the Baruch Hu, is on page 146. If you are able, please rise.
Sorry, I gotta get in tune. Lai la 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 la. Lai la 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 la. Lai la 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 la. Lai la 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 la. Lai la 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 la. Lai la 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 la. Baruch Hu et Adonai, Hamevorach. Baruch Adonai, Hamevorach, Hamevorach, Le'olam va'ed.
Please join me at the top of page 149 in English. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Your wisdom sets the way on which time and season glide. Your breath guides the sail of the stars. Creator of the tide of time and light, you guide the current of day into night. As heaven spans to infinity, you set its course for eternity. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Baruch atah Adonai, Hama'ariv Aravim. Page 151. As you taught Torah to those whose names I bear, teach me Torah too. Its mystery beckons, yet I struggle with its truth. You meant Torah for me. Did you mean the struggle for me too? Don't let me struggle alone. Help me to understand, to be wise, to listen, to know. Lead me into the mystery. Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Vaed.
Please be seated.
V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha uv'chol nafshecha uv'chol me'odecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavacha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam B'shivdecha b'veitecha, uv'lechtecha v'derech, uv'shokbecha uv'kumecha, u'kshartam la'ot al yadecha, l'totafot bein einecha, u'ktavtam al mezuzot beitecha, uv'isharecha. L'ma'an tiskaru, va'asitem et kol mitzvotai, Vitem kiroshim lelohechem, ani Adonai Elohechem, asher hotzeti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim, liot lachem lelohim, ani Adonai Elohechem.
Page 158. After Moses and the Jewish people fled from Pharaoh and were liberated from bondage in Egypt, they crossed the Sea of Reeds and sung in joy and praise, led by Miriam and the Israelite women on the shores with many instruments and lots of dancing. They sang this very song, although probably with a different melody, I would imagine.
Yeah, I don't think they did The Water is Wide back then. And we do some of the blessings to contemporary melodies, contemporary as in almost like popular melodies. So this one is The Water is Wide, which was requested by a congregant, and a beautiful idea. So if you don't know the Hebrew, you can at least hum along, The Water is Wide. Micha mocha ba'elim Adonai, Micha mocha nedar b'kodesh, norah tehilot osef eleh, norah tehilot osef eleh, malchutecha ra'u banecha, bokei hayam lifnei Moshe u'Miriam ze'eli anu v'amru Adonai imlo hilos, o sefele, nora tehilo, o sefele.
Please join me at the top of page 161. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Adonai, help us to walk with good companions, to live with hope in our hearts and eternity in our thoughts, that we may lie down in peace and rise up waiting to do your will. Baruch atah Adonai, haporei sukat shalom, aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael, va'al Yerushalayim.
Ashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom, l'shalom. V'hamidenu shomreinu l'chayim. Fros aleinu sukat shlomecha, ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha. Ashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom, l'shalom. V'hamidenu shomreinu l'chayim. Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha, ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha. Shelter us beneath your wings, O Adonai. Guard us from all harmful things, O Adonai. Keep us safe throughout the night, till we wake with morning's light. Teach us, God, wrong from right. Amen. 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 Amen.
Please take a moment now for your own silent thoughts and prayers.
Page 179, right in the middle. Lo yisagoy el goy cherev, lo yilmadu od milchama. Nation shall not take up sword against nation. They shall never again know war. We'll start with just a simple Ayo. Oh. keep doing that. And I'll sing the next part while you keep singing that if you want. Keep going. Ayo. Lo yisagoy el goy cherev. Lo yilmadu od milchama. Lo yisagoy el goy cherev. Lo yilmadu od milchama. Lo yisagoy el goy cherev. Lo yilmadu od milchama. Lo yisagoy el goy cherev. Lo yilmadu od milchama.
At this point in our service, we pause to think of those in need of healing on this Shabbat, on this Sabbath, healing of body, healing of spirit, and healing of heart. And we ask God to bestow the bracha, the blessing of refuah shlema, full and complete healing on the following men and women from our community or those known and loved by our congregation: Ilana Massey, Kevin Brackett, Michelle Camisia, Jesse Friedman, Brenda Flood, Sharon Blevis, Kirk Whitlatch, David Rabb, Jensen Beach, Aaron Ledden, Rachel Sodick, Blake Battles, Michaela Cohen, Diane Rado Persile, Rudolfo Gonzalez, Tracy Adams, Joan Wilmert, Kim Stevens, James Lynch, Don Copeland, Dee Copeland, Rachel Hartstein, Sally Gordon, Nancy Pollock, Donna Batdorf, Pat Shapiro, and Brad Honorado. And if anyone here or at home has a name that they'd like to share, I invite you to please do so. The Misha Barak prayer is on page 511.
Of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen.
We continue with the Aleinu on page 586. If you are able, please rise.
Aleinu l'shabeach la'adon ha'kol, la'teit gedula li'yotzer b'reshit, shelo asanu kegoye haratzot, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ היום ההוא. ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו
Please be seated. I have the honor and privilege now of inviting up a CBS member as well as a city council person, Beth Painter, who has a proclamation she's going to read for us tonight about Jewish Heritage Month.
Thank you, Rabbi Niles. It's good to see everyone here tonight. At Council, we do proclamations regularly. And May happens to be Jewish American Heritage Month. And we read this proclamation on Tuesday, and I asked if I could come and take a few minutes and read it to our community tonight. And I will be presenting the community with a copy of the proclamation. Rabbi came on Tuesday to receive the proclamation from council. We all read it together. Unfortunately, he left with the Mental Health Month proclamation, so I'm glad I can be here today to get him.
Right?
Yeah, there's some crossover. At any rate, this is in recognition of the month of May 2024 as Jewish American Heritage Month. Whereas from our nation's earliest days, Jewish Americans have been an essential part of the American story, greatly contributing to the religious, cultural, political, economic, and intellectual advancement of all people, even while in the face of discrimination and adversity, and have enriched our country, stirred our conscience, and challenged us to extend the miracles of freedom and security. And whereas the federal government proclaimed May as Jewish American Heritage Month in 2006 in recognition of the over 350-year history of Jewish contributions to American culture. And whereas as we celebrate the rich heritage of the Jewish American community in the city of Napa and the nation, we recognize that American Jews have worked tirelessly to strengthen the promise of religious freedom and civil rights by joining together with all faiths to reject ignorance and intolerance, teach empathy and compassion, and root out hatred wherever it exists, and are compelled to never forget. And whereas anti-Semitism rose exponentially this past year, and Jewish communities continue to confront hostility and bigotry, the city of Napa shares the obligation to condemn and combat anti-Semitism and hatred wherever they exist. And whereas during Jewish American Heritage Month, the city of Napa celebrates the hard-fought progress won through the struggle and sacrifice of Jewish Americans, and we rededicate ourselves to building a world where diversity is cherished and faith is protected. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Beth Painter, on behalf of Scott Sedgley, the mayor of City of Napa, along with all of our Napa City Council, do hereby proclaim May 2024 as Jewish American Heritage Month in the city of Napa and call upon all residents to celebrate and thank Jewish Americans past and present who have contributed immeasurably to the fabric of American history, culture, science, education, and social justice, and to many aspects of our local Napa community. Thank you for giving me a moment to read that.
Thank you, Beth.
You're very welcome, and I will leave this with
Oh,
Liz.
okay, great.
This is the real one.
Okay, thank you. I'd also like to call now CBS board member Dave Dubrow to read some important announcements for us tonight.
Shabbos, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom.
Camera there, put the camera up there to wave. We're live streaming around the world. it's getting old, huh?
Yeah, it's your shtick. I mean, what are you, it works.
Lord knows I have
It
shtick.
works.
Yeah. Anyway, good Shabbos, everybody. Great to see you. And to our guests that have come from multiple locations, welcome. To our honored speaker today, welcome. Glad you're here. So getting right to the announcements, because you know I blab. There are no religious schools on Sunday, May 12th. It's Mother's Day, so call your mom. Saturday, May 11th, Rabbi Goldstein will do Torah study starting at 10:30 a.m. Right here, yeah?
Tomorrow morning. Yeah.
Tomorrow morning, right here. On Monday, May 13th, be sure to join the annual congregation meeting. President Roberta Solomon will be giving a report, as well as Fred Goldman, regarding the state of the synagogue, and talks will be followed by a congregational vote. Please contact Mara in the office if you can't attend, because we'll need an absentee ballot. As an added incentive for coming to the meeting, wine and cheese. Lord knows I like wine and cheese. Will be served, and Max Patrick, my man, where you at, buddy? There he is, right there. Great to see you at across town last week, the other day. He'll be holding a bake sale for his mitzvah project. I know his mom, and she studied, I think, CIA, right? And so this is real baked goods, not no cut and slice like I do. Anyway, the meeting begins at 5:30 p.m. Please come. There'll be a bake sale that Max is doing. On May 18th, there's a spring fling. Join us for an evening of edible nibbles and drinks. Bidding on over 40 experiences will be held as part of a silent auction. Is to be sure, it should be an evening highlight. On May 21st, from 5 to 7, we'll have a meeting with the junior youth group. Activities yet to be determined, but please register through the website for all the youth. June 15th, we'll have another concert to benefit CBS at the Blue Note with Fleetwood Mac tribute band. Fleetwood Mac Romaine. Yeah. Takes a musician to get it right, right? Appreciate you, man. And then be sure to buy raffle tickets on the synagogue website for that event. A couple of warm wishes to give for this week's birthdays and anniversaries. Happy birthday, and please don't be mad at me if I say this wrong. Charla Ranganam. Yes, no, get it right? I hope I did. Dana Simon, Morgan Riedendow, Elias Wilmert. Hey, Peter. And then also Kelly Decker. Happy anniversary to Richard and Wendy Zitter. They've been married to Coyote 18 years. Jason and Mary Luros, 13 years. And something special, I want to make sure I get this right. Bear with me. I want to personally congratulate and send a mazel tov to, sorry, I'm a little slow here. I haven't met her yet. Rachel Stern and Andrew Wallach on their recent marriage. Like a few weeks ago, maybe. So mazel tov to you. 1 month anniversary. Awesome. Mazel tov. Congrats. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rabbi.
I officiated at that marriage, and they are one happy couple. You're doing well after 1 month, right? That's good. Okay, we are going to switch gears now. Our thoughts turn to those who have departed this earth, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every race and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death. We remember those who have died during the past 12 months. Minnie Shostak, Kevin McCarville, Etta Kessler, Faye Goldstein-Glick, Diana Coyne, Peggy Dooley, Eddie Feld, Frankie Block, Joyce Bisberg, Jake Goldstein, David Mendelson, Nancy Jeanette, Alexander Buddy Cohen, Berna Joseph Sherman, Rabbi Lori Phillips, Pearl Shine, Jerry Mautner, Lauren Bisberg, Terry Swartz, Chava Pearl Bot Herschel Verose Gittel, Victor Lynn, Rosella Bernstein, and Morris Feynman. We also remember and honor the yahrzeits, the anniversaries of the deaths of Harold Levy, Frank Povolillo, Leona Padrid, Ann Dines Pesses, Julius Krohn, Alvin Lee Block, Henrietta Foreman, Arnold B. Shacknow, Fred Rosenthal, Bruce Jeffrey Cohen, Ian Miller, Norman Charney, Minnie Shostak, Myrna Abramovich, and Paul Newman. And if anyone has a name they'd like to add to our list, I invite you to please do so. The mourner's cottage is on page 598. Please rise. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shmei Rabbah be'alma divra chirte v'yamlich malchute b'chaychon v'yomechon uv'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael b'agala uv'izman kariv v'yimru amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah mevorach le'alam u'lamei maya Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitalel v'yitalal shmei dekudsha b'richu Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, damiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shmaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May the source of peace grant peace to all those in mourning and comfort to all those who are bereaved, and let us all say, amen. Please be seated. Before I invite up our guest speaker, we have our final song. So what do you have for us tonight?
Well, let's do the end of the prayer, Oseh Shalom, and we'll do a melody we've done before, hopefully.
Oh, and let me just say, we're going to do the Kiddush and Motzi at the very end of the talk.
Okay, so we're just on page 598. There are a little additional words that you are not there, but you'll recognize them. Let's see if we're on here.
Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'imru, amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'imru, amen. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la, ya 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 la 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 la. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'imru, amen. Ve'imru, amen.
Thank you.
Sure. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Good Shabbos again to everyone. And it's, again, so nice to see you, and welcome to those of you who are here for the first time or for the second time. I think after about 6 or 10, you're regulars at that point. Those of you who are regular CBS members know that when I started here, it's hard to believe, almost exactly 7 years ago, I started a series called Faces of Faith. And we have brought in different faith leaders from the community, from Napa and from the area every year. I think during the height of COVID, we didn't do it, but we have brought people from the Catholic tradition, from the Muslim tradition, from the various Protestant denominations, from all different spiritual traditions to speak with me and with our congregation about their journeys and about their traditions. And we are very fortunate tonight to have Peter Coyote with us to talk about his fascinating spiritual journey. Now, I don't know where to start in terms of introducing Peter because his journey has been so interesting. Many of you know Peter from his film work. He's appeared in scores and scores of movies over the years. I think the one that more people know about than some of the others is E.T. Back in the day. What year was that? That was, you don't even know anymore. That was a long time ago. I can't remember breakfast. But Peter has been in scores of films. He does voice acting work for many different kinds of documentaries and films. A lot of us know Peter through his voice work with some of the Ken Burns documentaries on PBS. And Peter's also a Buddhist priest that not everyone knows about. We had the opportunity to talk with one another a couple months ago before they left. Laura and Peter left on their honeymoon. And so I've gotten to know a little bit more about Peter's journey. I want to focus tonight more on your spiritual journey than on your other professional career. And so I'd like to invite Peter Coyote to come up and sit with me up in front of the bima. Just right here.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah. And I assume your mic is working?
You have to ask your fellow back there.
Can you all hear
Can
Peter
you hear
well?
me?
Okay, good. Okay.
I just have to say that my grandmother, my mother's mother, who was a Polish Jew, mean as a snake, smoked her cigarettes like this, drank tea through a sugar cube. If she knew that all of you were coming to hear me, she would have said in Yiddish, "Es wird helfen wir teuten Bankes," which means that will help like setting cups on a dead man. So good luck.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm not here to convert you.
You never lost me.
I never lost you. Well, I want to start with a question in that vein, and I know a little bit more about your Jewish background because we had that conversation. But tell us, since you started your life as Peter Cohen in New York, what kind of a Jewish background did you have? I mean, what was your Jewish life back when you were a young person in New York?
Well, you could say that Judaism is like three great ships. There's a religious ship, there's a cultural ship, and there's an intellectual ship. And I've sailed on two of them. My family was a secular family, a lot of socialists and communists, reformers, labor organizers, school teachers, people who were attacked during the McCarthy period. At the time that I was growing up, I was born in 1941, and Jews were not white people. There were schools I couldn't go to. I couldn't join the country club. I'd stand outside when my friends went swimming. And it gave you a perspective as an outsider, which is something that Jews have used to great effect as artists, as observers, like Southerners in the United States, being outside the great glory ship of America, the self-congratulatory vehicle. And so I grew up with a very strong sense of justice, what's right and what's wrong, and a kind of a burning rage that my government was lying about my relatives. I mean, these were old Altacockers who were spreading, smears on bagels and saying, that Trotsky was a man, boy. He says, Trotsky was a pig. Stalin, that's a man. These guys couldn't have overthrown a pushcart. But they were wholehearted. My mother's cousin, Irving Adler, was the first man fired from the New York City school system for being a communist. Sued them 28 years later and won 28 years back pay. That showed him. So my life was very secular. And my father was the president of the Jewish Community Center, who was fired for refusing to censor speakers, pre-censor them, during the McCarthy period. So I guess you'd say I come from a liberal intellectual tradition, and except for my bar mitzvah, which is
You had a bar mitzvah.
I actually had a bar mitzvah.
I didn't know that.
And as soon as you started saying, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, I remembered Mr. Feynman. Because at 12, I was suddenly, it was announced that I was going to be bar mitzvah because my grandparents were Orthodox. They had fled the Tsar's draft. My grandfather was studying to be a rabbi. He was a weaver. And suddenly Mr. Feynman showed up. And he was a man, in Yiddish, it's a great language. They have precise delineations of stupidness. Like you may not know the difference between a schlemiel and a schlemazel. You know, don't you? A schlemiel is a guy when he comes into a room, you feel like someone just left. And a schlemiel spills soup on a schlemazel. I don't know what Mr. Feynman was, but as soon as he came into the room, I was struck with an overwhelming desire to sleep. It's like my friends were outside playing, I could hear them, and we're going, Baruch, Baruch. I'd get 2 words a day. But the irony is when you started, I'm 82 now, I still remember Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bo chavanu. I could still do it.
Are some of those associations positive?
Oh, they're all positive.
Because I know some people go through the bar bat mitzvah experience or Judaism as a young child and don't have the most positive associations.
Well, there were things about the Jewish Community Center I didn't like. I didn't like the materialism of it. I didn't like the way the kids were bragging about the cars their fathers drove or the fur coats their mothers had. My people they were very political. Mm-hmm. And although my dad was sort of a financial pirate, I mean, he minted money for a long time in his life. Then he lost it all. Mm-hmm. But for a long time, he didn't talk about money. He had like an old school kind of view, like old wealth. You didn't show wealth, you didn't talk about it, you didn't flaunt your stuff. So, no, they were all positive and much of it comedic. I'm doing a talk later this month with Michael Krasny, who's the PBS guy, and he's doing a favor because he's talking to me about my book, because I talked to him about his book on Jewish humor. And Michael's the only man I know that I've never been able to get to the punchline of a Jewish joke with. Not one, and I have hundreds of them, and they're all named after my parents, Moish and Ruti. So I have a lot of good-humored memories. I'm proud of being a Jew. It's just that at the time that I came to require some kind of spiritual center of gravity, I didn't have Jewish religious practice in my mind and body, and I became intrigued with Buddhism, which is not exactly a religion. Buddha was not a holy man. Buddha was not a special person. Buddha cracked a problem, the problem of feeling like I'm in here and the rest of it's out there, and that we're separate entities in a divided universe. So all the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, have a kind of divided universe. There's good and there's evil, and God is separate from his creations or her creations. But Buddhism was not like that. Buddhism is a monism. And they would say, for instance, like that thing that you call I or me or mine has never for an instant been separate from oxygen, from water, from microbes in the soil that grew your food, from pollinating insects, from the labors of the people that planted the cotton, that picked the cotton, that grew it, that weaved it. So to say I'm a separate thing is only half the equation. And the other half is that we're all part of one thing.
Well, let's hold that thought for a second. I want to back up for a second. So you left New York, you made your way out to the West Coast, to San Francisco, you embraced the counterculture here, and you clearly have always, I don't know about always, but clearly at that point in your life you started seeking. You were a spiritual seeker. Who introduced you to Buddhism, to these ideas, or what did it happen a little bit later in your life? Who first exposed you to this tradition?
Well, actually something happened earlier. The manager of my farm, who was my hero, a very handsome Scotch-Irish guy, was a game warden. And he'd been in gun battles with Italian milliners in the Everglades in Florida, saving the birds from hatters in New York. And he started lecturing me on the cycles of life and the interdependence of all things. When I was about 8, he gave me a book called, it'll come to me. This is an 82-year-old head. Anyway, and he was the one that gave me a kind of spiritual frame of reference for nature. Then when I was in my early teens, again, I was critical. I was sort of on the other side of the great American myth and dissatisfied with a lot of what I saw, racism and materialism and accretion of wealth and stuff. And I started reading the Beats, who were adults and who gave me the first language and conceptual framework to have a place to stand and critique my culture. And they were all interested in Buddhism. And one of them, a poet named Gary Snyder, sort of a first among equals, I had the good fortune to meet him later in life when I was out here in the counterculture. And he was kind of a heroic figure. And his life was so self-evidently useful and harmonious and beautiful and orderly. I knew it had something to do with the fact that he'd spent 9 years in a monastery in Japan and that he practiced Zen Buddhism. And I just resolved to know this man better. And he became my first informal teacher. And then I had a lot of trouble with drugs. And when I was cleaning up from a drug habit, I met and fell in love with a woman who was a serious student at the San Francisco Zen Center. And I began to meditate regularly and submit, I can't say willingly, but I submitted to the discipline and order of sitting, and somehow stuck long enough to begin to realize that it was useful, that it was actually my head began to calm down, my body got stronger, I felt like I had a bigger field to run around in. And that was, 50 some odd years ago, and I've never stopped.
And at what point did you become a priest? And maybe you could help explain to our congregation what is involved in becoming a priest.
Sure.
I mean, someone like me goes to rabbinical school for 5 years, and you get a degree, and you get ordained, and then you start working.
Yeah.
What is it like to become a Buddhist priest in your tradition?
So my teacher asked me, would I go to this 3-year priest training thing? And I said, well, yeah, you're asking me to go, I'll go, but I'm never going to be a priest. Just forget that. He said, no, just go and see what you learn. And so I went to this 3-year training. It was like a 4-day weekend a month for 3 years. And we had 3 teachers, and we studied everything from psychology to taking care of a constituency, just about everything you might study. And I was so impressed by the people that I was with. There were about 40 people in my class that by the end of it, I wanted to raise my game. I just wanted to step up. And so I asked my teacher if I could be ordained. So that preparation for the ordination took another year of practice and study. And then I was ordained. And then about 5 years later, I was transmitted, which means that my teacher gives me his authority to ordain my own priests and to be an independent teacher. And so basically, a priest is a calling. Some people are called on to serve other people and to be helpful, and it's just a calling. I don't know another way to describe it. I ordained someone that was not their calling. It was a terrible mistake. But that's the way I understand it now. And so I've ordained someone and transmitted him to be my successor. And now I'm training about 8 people to be lay teachers. We call it a lay entrustment, where they could run Buddhist groups and they could run discussion groups and teach meditation. but they wouldn't have the authority to ordain priests, which brings people into the lineage. I mean, my name is somewhere in Japan in a book that's, traces a family tree all the way down from the Buddha. So I think that it was just an evolution. It's who I always was. I was always involved with trying to help other people, relieve suffering, do what I could. I didn't know why. It was just the way I was.
Another very creative Jew with the last name of Cohen became a Buddhist as well, Leonard Cohen.
Yeah, I knew Leonard.
And,
but I'm Kohan.
Oh, you're
I'm
Kohan.
Cohon.
Oh, okay, Kohan.
But I can handle the Torah.
You can handle it. One of the things that I find interesting and also a little disturbing as a Jew and as a rabbi, because I feel that within every religious tradition, there are wonderful teachings and rituals and holy books. And within every religious tradition, there are problematic passages and there are archaic rituals. And there are things, without naming particular religious denominations, there are things that are very problematic. How would you say that Judaism wasn't quite enough for you? Was it the monism versus the more binary nature of the Abrahamic religions? Because Judaism has a tradition of meditation. Judaism has a tradition of fasting. Judaism has a tradition of mysticism, if you dig deeply enough. And I'm wondering, in your experience, were you exposed to enough of those traditions and teachings in Judaism, or do you feel that Judaism itself just wasn't the right path for you, and Buddhism was?
No, I don't like to compare.
Okay.
Because had I been fully educated as a Jew, had I been taught ceremonially, it might have been enough. I'm not sure. But there was something. So in Buddhism, we take vows. And those vows are impossible to fulfill. When we say beings are numberless, I vow to save them. We mean save them from ignorance, save them from suffering. Well, it's impossible. But if you don't set an impossible aspiration, you're going to stop short of doing everything that you can do. And I was very moved by that. I had a kind of a strange experience. My mother had a crushing nervous breakdown at about 3. And my aunt sent over a young black girl from Henderson, North Carolina, to help take care of the children. And she was an astounding being. She was, she and her boyfriend, later her husband, basically raised me until I was 14, 11 years. I buried her 2 years ago at 91. And there was a whole part of my growing up that was spent in a black community, black family. And just listening to their stories and listening and then observing the levels of injustice that even my own family could tolerate just made me angry and built some kind of a dedication that I was not going to settle. So I'm not accusing the Jews of settling, but in my family, this woman's husband worked for my uncle. And so my uncle would come at the table and he would be talking about how the unions were killing him and they were just taking his profits. And then Ozzy, my black dad, would say, yeah, Bert was there and he came out of the office and the union guy was stuffing an envelope into his pocket. And it was another year we didn't get a raise. And it would infuriate me. And I would challenge my dad or I would challenge my uncle. And they would tell this stupid story. They'd say, son, the world is a boat with 3 people in it and there's only enough food for 2. What are you going to do? I said, everybody's going to eat less. They had these models, and I thought if this, and my dad went to MIT at 15. He was a brilliant guy. But at some point, I thought, if that's the best that you can come up with, I'm not interested in that. What am I supposed to do? Kill one guy and throw him overboard so the other guy and I can wait for the other one to fall asleep? That's not my idea of a model. And so then, I don't want to get too far afield, but I began to see problems well, remember in the Bible when the Jews wanted a king? And
And the prophets said, don't
Solomon
do it.
said,
You're going to get into trouble.
Don't, brother, pain in the neck. He'll take your daughters, he'll take your sons. Why do you want a king? They say, the Goyim has a king. We want a king. So they got a king. Well, somebody said, there was a possibility that the Jews could have remained an emblem for people of having a culture and a belief that was global without attaching it to a nation state. Might have happened. I'm not judging them right or wrong, but they wanted a nation state, so they got a nation state, and they got all the problems of a nation state. We have a nation state in America. We got a lot of problems with it. So it was the Buddhism, there was some idea of the monism, of actually every single thing on earth was a product of this fundamental energy that was behind all matter and all forms. So while it may trouble me to realize that I'm made of the same stuff as Donald Trump, I am. And so I have to look at this person and say, he has equal standing to be on this earth. So I have to figure out what were his experiences that made him this way. Maybe if my father was in the Ku Klux Klan, maybe if my father had berated my younger brother to suicide, maybe I would wind up like that. So there were challenges in Buddhism that I really picked up and was challenged by. And it's not like Judaism doesn't have it. It's the deepest religion that I know. But Buddhism is a practice. And Buddhism is a daily practice in how to live your life according to the notions that you are simultaneously a single entity and part of the whole. And your responsibility is to that whole. And your responsibility is to model the life of Buddha, who was a man, in your own life. And there's something about it, I was ripe and ready. I came out of 8 years of heroin habits, and I'd basically torn my life apart. And maybe I was raw enough and open enough and desperate enough to surrender to discipline. But I did, and it changed my life in a fundamental way. And so, without comparing it to anything else, it's just become my path. So, as Judaism's your path. And so, here we are, shoulder to shoulder.
Well, I mean, I could, when we spoke a while ago, I think I said to you that I could talk about this for days, because you're such a great conversationalist and you've had such a fascinating journey. I said we should go get a beer and just talk about it, but I know you don't drink.
I don't drink.
So we can't do that. Maybe we'll have coffee one of these days. But I do want to ask one more question, and then I want to open up the floor. So that scene you mentioned before when the Israelites say, give us a king.
Yeah.
Because it's the wild, not the Wild West, it was the wild ancient Near East at that time. And the prophet at the time was Samuel. And Samuel, like you said, warns them, don't mix church and state, don't take... I mean, I don't think they knew about nation states at that point, but they knew that mixing politics with religion was probably not a smart idea. And like rabbis today, no one listens to us. No one listened to the prophets either. So they don't listen to Samuel, they get a king, and within a few generations, there's a civil war. But look, the final question I have for you is, and I want to ask you more about Buddhism, but I don't have time to do that tonight. So I do want to ask one more Jewish question, because you mentioned very interestingly this tripartite way of breaking down Jewish identity, the religious, the cultural, and the intellectual. And you said you followed two of them early on. At this point in your life, at 82, you're a Buddhist priest. Where, if at all, does your Jewishness fit in?
When I went to Zen Center, San Francisco Zen Center, 80% of the people there were Jews. Jewboods, we call them.
Jewboods.
And there's some deep congruence, which is, it's a very Jewish thing to say, on the one hand, right? You're all laughing. On the other hand, right? And that's very much, we say, you'll never find gum under the table in a Buddhist restaurant because we look at all sides. And I think I find the Judaism there. I find the Judaism in a certain irony in life, a perspective that, in my own slang, we don't go for the okie doke. You know, I mean, I don't know a Jew that doesn't have a mental passport under the bed. I don't know anyone who says, this is my country, because it could go south in a minute. We have 5,700 and something years of being shuttled around the globe. We need a middle class. Get the Jews. Let them be the tax collectors. The people will hate them, but get the Jews. We'll build a middle class. Time to go. Catherine of Aragon, 1492, threw the Jews out. That's when my father's people left Spain. So I see deep wisdom in Judaism, in the culture, in the intellectual life that is much deeper than I see in most Western European cultural life. And I see the same depth in Buddhism. It's expressed differently. And so I don't know, I feel Jewish. I'll tell you a quick story. I was in Syria before the war, and I was doing a story for Vanity Fair, and I met Khalil Mishal, who was the head of the armed wing of Hamas. And I met him at a diplomatic function. I was with a friend. We were both reporting. I said, would you talk to some Americans? He said, sure. They never want to talk to me. So I said, okay. So he gave me his card. I called him. Next day, he sent some guys over. They took us to this place. They took our fountain pens apart. They took our phones apart. They went through all of our clothes. And there's a big room, and in the Middle East, everybody sits in big stuffed easy chairs. And 12 guys came in, and he came in. He was charming. He was very smart, very charismatic, very educated. So I just jumped right into it. I said, Mr. Mishal, I think I should tell you that my friend and I are Jews. He said, so what? He's Jewish, he's Jewish, he's Jewish, he's Jewish. I don't have a problem with Jews. I have a problem with Zionists. Oh, okay. Well, that threw me off a little. Anyway, we had a long conversation. At the end of the conversation, I said to him, why won't you accept Israel's right to exist? And he laughed. He says, it sounds so fair, doesn't it, Peter? I said, yeah, it sounds really fair. He says, don't you see it's a trick question? I said, no, what's the trick? He said, look, we know Israel's there. We could make a treaty about economics. We could make a treaty about egress and ingress. We could make a treaty about postage stamps. We could make a treaty about everything. The one thing we can't say is that they had a right to come in and take our land. What would Native Americans say if you went to them and said, you have to say we had a right to do what we did? So I could accept that point of view. And I'd never seen that in the press. I'd never seen that anywhere. And so I left, once again, like with a big puzzle. These are people, they're educated people, they're human beings like me. If I just think of them as terrorists, there's no dialogue. If I sit in a room and talk face to face, there's a possibility that something could move. So that's Jewish to me.
Okay, thank you. I have some thoughts, but I'm going to shut up. And I want to open up the floor. So any questions for Peter?
Yes.
And just hold it up to you.
Okay. When you were studying the 3-year period, did your curriculum or your process include all of the, I don't know how else to say this, all of the great books of different religious beliefs?
No.
No, not at all.
No.
What was,
I mean,
Yeah.
if you went to a Catholic monastery, you wouldn't study Judaism. So we studied the vows and the precepts and the ways and Buddha's. So I can give you a very quick, Buddha's very first utterance after he achieved enlightenment was the Four Noble Truths. He came back to the guys he'd been studying with, And he wasn't Deepak Chopra, he wasn't famous. He was a guy, he'd been studying with them, and he went off and he'd starved himself until he fainted and fell in a ditch. And a young girl, a teenager, was walking by with a pail of rice and milk, which was an offering to a Hindu temple, and she saw him there, and she gave him this rice and milk, which offended his ascetic friends. But it taught him that he had to take care of his body. And he nourished himself, and he made a vow to sit until he was enlightened. And after he achieved enlightenment, he struggled for 49 days, he thought it was too subtle to teach, but he thought he had to try. Maybe he could help somebody. So he went back to his friends. And his friends recognized immediately, Moshe is different. So he gave a little lecture. It's called Four Noble Truths. And the first noble truth is called dukkha. And dukkha has been translated as suffering, which is kind of a Christian term. It sounds mental, but it actually means affliction. And he defined it. It's birth, it's death, it's being wounded, it's loss, it's grieving, it's being stuck in a situation you don't want to be in, it's being denied access to a situation you do want to be in. And he called it a noble truth. He's saying it's not your fault. You're not suffering because you're spiritually incapacitated. Affliction is the energy that moves the world. And if it's true, it means real. And if it's noble, it means worthy of dignity and respect. And the second noble truth was called samudaya. And it means when you're afflicted, something arises. Somebody cuts you off in a car and you get angry. Neither one is your fault. They just happen. The third noble truth is the first one you can do something about. It's called nirodha. And the image is a clay wall around a fire pit that stopped the peasants' fires from going and burning down the village. And that's our meditating. That's where you sit with whatever arises and you learn that you can contain it. It's the running away from bad thoughts that get us in trouble, throw us into the wrong bed, have us overshop, overdrink, break down our dignity, cause a lot of trouble. But when you're sitting meditating and you learn that you can take whatever arises, you can handle it, then you're ready for the fourth noble truth, which is called marga, and it's the eightfold path. It's walking through your life and asking yourself, am I doing the right thing for a living? Is this right attitude? Am I speaking right about people? There's no Buddhist cops out there. This is for you to decide for yourself. And that's basically it. And so studying is very simple, but studying the ramifications of it takes a lifetime.
Thank you. Yes, Robin.
Forgive a naive question, but I'm curious about the Buddhist view of an afterlife.
Good question. It's not naive at all. So there's a range of opinion. So for people like the Tibetans, the idea of a self that floats from body to body through time is very much a part of their practice. Zen people don't think too much about it. The reason being that Buddha's description of reality was called dependent origination. It literally means know this, know that. No sunshine, no tree. No tree, no apple. No apple, no eating the apple. Everything in the world is dependent on other things. So because of that, we say they're empty of a self. Even the thing I call myself, if I take my hand and I dissect it, I'll never find any essence of a hand in it. I'll take all the skin, the tendons, the bone, the ligaments, and even when you talk about yourself, me, I, mine, that thing you're referring to has no shape. You don't know where in your body it is. It has no color. It's really an awareness. And it can't exist without a body, without blood, without oxygen, without a skull, without a brain. So for me, the idea of a self that endures from body to body to body is actually a violation of that teaching, because it's saying the universe is sneakily divided. There's self and other. But that's contrary to what the Buddha actually taught. So there are sects of Buddhism that think a lot about the afterlife, and we say, fine, if that makes you feel good, go ahead. And the Zen people are much more interested in what's going on right now, right here.
Sounds very Jewish to me.
Okay.
Why don't we take one or two more? Yes, David.
I'm just kind of puzzled by your last story
David, put it.
that you were challenged.
Yeah, just hold it.
Oh, you were challenged by the Jews being in Israel, and that seemed to upset him. Why didn't you point out to him that the Jews had been there for 3,000, maybe 4,000 years?
Well, he knows that as well as I do. I wanted to hear what he had to say. I know the Jews have been there. I know the Palestinians have been there. And I'm doing my best to stay out of that conversation tonight. But I had this chance to talk to a guy that is, just described as a terrorist. And I wanted to know everything he thought. And I had about an hour. So I didn't raise that with him. I did have the guts to tell him I was Jewish. And I was pleasantly surprised that he just grinned and we kept on.
Yes. Wait, no, you need the mic. People at home won't be able to hear you. Alan.
I was curious to ask you, you mentioned at an early point in your life, you realized that as a Jew, you weren't a white person in America. And I'm just wondering whether your Jewish self sees that issue differently today, or whether you would still reach that conclusion.
No, well, let's put it this way. There are huge swaths of America that don't include Jews among white people. If you were to talk to white nationalists, Christian white nationalists, they might sound like they're friends of Israel's because they expect Jesus to come back and all the Jews to fly away. But no, I think Jews are outsiders. And I think one of the reasons they're getting so much trouble from young students today is that they've suddenly become seen as white and powerful and been allied with political superstructures oppressing smaller, weaker, poorer people of color. I don't think it's that simple myself, but I see that as an outgrowth of Jews' acceptance into society. And it was this way once upon a time. 22 members of my family could not believe that Germany would ever turn against its most respected citizens. And the ones that said, yeah, it might, and left are still alive. And those 22 are not. So I always keep a healthy skepticism. I don't want to be caught napping.
Peter, thank you so much for coming tonight.
Thank you so much, all of you.
As I said earlier, your career, and I had forgotten to mention beginning about your writing. You've written a number of books and you have a new one out now. Your career has been so prolific and so wide-ranging. I'm glad we were able to primarily focus on the spiritual aspect of your life and your journey. And you're always welcome, both you and Laura.
Thank you so much.
Would you stand up here with us? We're going to say the blessings over the challah and the wine, and then everyone's welcome to the oneg, to the reception we have afterwards. So let me grab it. Please rise. Okay, I know you don't drink, but I'll do it.
Okay.
So like my grandfather.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Amen.
L'chaim.
L'chaim.
L'chaim toivim u'l'shulam. That's what the old Jewish
My
people
grandfather would read the prayers at Passover so fast because he'd get to the wine. Who knew?
say. Okay.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. B'tei avon.
Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Shabbat
Peter,
shalom.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shalom. Shabbat, Shalom. Shabbat, Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat.